My parents made me include my talented cousin in everything, so I included him in something that destroyed his future. I started making indie games back before Steam Greenlight existed. I wasn't successful by any means, but Glenn always tagged along. Family supports family, my parents said, only to regret those words later. For 2 years, I worked at game development like clockwork. I'd spend Saturdays coding mechanics and Sundays designing levels until 3 a.m. Glenn inserted himself into everything. He'd hover over my shoulder giving suggestions, take credit for my pixel art, and even told people we were co-developers at family gatherings. My parents thought this was wonderful. Even before all this, I had loved creating games, so to have a small following on itch.io and parents who forced me to share this with Glenn was already wearing me down. But one day, I suddenly hit my first 1,000 downloads. My parents insisted Glenn and I celebrate together since he was part of the team. Glenn posted about our achievement on social media. We're heading to 10,000 next. I felt so trapped. Even though he never wrote a line of code or designed a single sprite, my parents still insisted I include him in everything, and I hated them for it. Then, after 1 year of development, I finally got the email I'd been waiting for. A publisher wanted to fund my next project. My heart raced, and I knew I wouldn't be able to focus at school after that, so I headed home early, planning to work on the contract proposal alone. But Glenn was already there. "Hi, your mom let me in," he said from my desk chair. "She said we should work on our next game together. Can't wait to see what we create." Perfect, I thought sarcastically. I had to share even this. My latest build was running on the screen, the platformer I'd spent months perfecting. Tight controls, innovative mechanics, pixel-perfect collision. "Oh man, this'll probably be our best game yet. Can't wait to show everyone," Glenn said. While he played, his Discord notification popped up. I glanced over without thinking and felt my heart stop. I didn't realize he'd left his messages open until it was too late. Until I saw everything I shouldn't have. "Still pretending to make games with your loser cousin?" his friend Paul asked. "Yep, another Friday watching him code while I get credit." His parents literally force him to include me. "Send beer, please, LOL." My hand trembled on my mouse. I knew I should have looked away, but I had to know what else he said. So I scrolled up through 2 years of messages between him, Paul, and his college friends. I felt my rage build with each text. Every single weekend I thought we were collaborating. He was mocking me. He spent our entire Saturday debugging again. Thank God his parents are delusional at least. Paul bragged about his internship at a real game studio. Glenn replied, "Lucky. Mine thinks making Flash games is a career." Sad face. When I got 1,000 downloads and we celebrated, he'd message them saying I acted like Notch over 1,000 randoms on the internet. "Just take credit and bounce when something real comes along," Paul advised. My vision blurred as I went through it all, realizing just how wrong I'd been about everything. Glenn then went on a long rant about how he'd been padding his resume with my work, using my games in his portfolio for job applications. Indie games earn nothing, but they look great on applications. It's like having a free intern. I only stick around for the resume padding, and clearly, this kid will never make it big. Everyone laughed in the chat, mocking my work, praising him for the smart play. I realized no one respected my work, especially not Glenn, and that's what hurt me the most. Not the mockery, but the theft. I sat there staring at my setup, at the publisher email, at Glenn playing my game. Then I looked at his Discord, at the portfolio site he'd linked, the job application drafts taking credit for everything I'd created, everything he'd stolen while pretending to support. So I included him in something new. I replied to the publisher with Glenn CC'd, accepting their offer. I included screenshots of his messages claiming sole credit. I included his portfolio showing my work as his. I included everything, just like my parents wanted. Since Glenn insists he's the real developer, I'm sure he can handle the contract negotiations and technical requirements alone. The publisher's response was swift. They'd already researched my work, knew Glenn had never contributed. They forwarded everything to the game development communities he'd applied to, posted warnings about portfolio theft. Glenn tried damage control, begging me to retract. My parents finally saw the messages, saw how he'd used their family supports family rule to steal my future. His job offers evaporated. Game studios blacklisted him. My parents apologized for forcing me to include him, calling themselves naive and distant. But who wouldn't be angry after being forced to be robbed? Glenn ended up in accounting, never touched game development again. But then, 10 years later, it happened. My 8-year-old son, an iPad kid, handed me his tablet and showed me a game he'd made in Scratch. "Can you help me add enemies, Dad?" "Of course, kiddo. That's what real family does," I told him. His face lit up. "Mom said you made real games once?" I stared into his eyes and felt all the anger finally fade. I opened my old development software for the first time in years and taught him everything Glenn never bothered to learn.